Today on Voice of Restoration.
The coming of the kings of the East. And I'm just going to give you a very quick summary. Rosh and Magog spoke concerning the location of Russia and its satellites. As you will see in that map, the portion where it is in green, you see Magog. To the north of it, in red, you see Rosh. That's the entire land, and all of those people, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, all of the Stan, they are all logged in that place. Now, Meshech and Tubal is also, a portion of it remains Russia, and a portion of it remains Turkey.
Teaching us to live soberly, righteously, and godly in this present world. This is Voice of Restoration, raising an army of true believers.
Hello and welcome to another exciting episode of the Voice of Restoration. We've been on a series titled The Coming of the Kings of the East, and God has opened our eyes to so much for us to learn about the truth of what is happening in our days. But the main focus of all of this is for us to know that the coming of the Lord is at hand. And what do we do with that information? It's for us to prepare for the coming of the Lord. That is the only way to escape the evil that is coming upon the land. We'll continue today again. So very quickly, you call your loved ones, your family members, get your writing materials. Let us learn at the feet of the Lord today. So join me to welcome the servant of God, Pastor Afolabi Oladele, as he takes us on the word. We're glad to have you, sir.
Thank you again, Sister Lucy, and thank you for joining us today in this fourth part of the broadcast of the series on the coming of the kings of the East. As we finished last broadcast, we withdrew your attention to the dual purpose of the Chinese expansion, the global power reach, and what I call the subversion of the substructure of the Judeo-Christian society of the Western world. The import of all these is to ensure that the New World Order, this coming king, becomes a dominant player in the construct of all those who are parties to and the activators of and the executors of the whole plan of the New World Order. We promised you that in some of the clips that will follow, you will not only see the way China has adapted its intent for global reach to every area of the world in line with their perception of the way the people think. And we showed you for about 9 minutes in the last broadcast how they have used it in the United States of America. Today, as we go on, we would like to show you the extension of Chinese power and its culture through what I have called earlier on economic baiting program. Economic baiting program. The Economist, that well-known worldwide read publication, noted this. China is now spending around $10 billion per year on a plan to boost its global soft power, according to an estimate that was given by David Schamberg of George Washington University. This includes plans to expand 1. China's foreign language media broadcast. 2. To create more Confucius institutes and foster educational exchanges and boost aid outflows, sponsor cultural festivals abroad, and generally try to portray Beijing today as a defender of the international order. Check this against what things Hu Jintao said, what Xi Jinping has taken over, and what has now evolved over the period of 2007 and 2020. Short it may be in the eyes of man, but the results are becoming very, very evident. In this next clip, for about half an hour, you would do well to listen intently and see how these things are unfolding. Now, before you jump to the conclusion that this is Western propaganda, PBS, the Public Broadcasting Service, is probably one of the most independent of any political affiliation. They run essentially documentaries, educative documentaries, and they cover different aspects of life. It just turns out that the growth and the display of Chinese power is something that has caught serious attention that people need to follow.
I'm Nick Schifrin. Welcome to China, Power and Prosperity, PBS NewsHour's in-depth look at the emerging superpower. With the support of the Pulitzer Center, we start at the top by examining the strongest Chinese leader in more than 50 years. In Beijing's Great Hall of the people clap in unison for one man. Xi Jinping, Communist Party General Secretary, Commander-in-Chief, President of the People's Republic of China, says he's making China great again.
The Chinese nation has achieved a tremendous transformation. It has stood up, grown rich, and is becoming strong. It has come to embrace the brilliant prospects of rejuvenation.
It's October 2017, and Xi tells party leaders one of his core beliefs, China's destiny, is to reclaim a central role in the world.
The banner of socialism with Chinese characteristics is now flying high and proud. It offers Chinese wisdom and a Chinese approach to solving the problems facing mankind.
Not since Mao Zedong, Communist China's founding father, has a Chinese leader suggested so clearly the world could emulate China. Not since Mao has China had a leader as powerful as Xi Jinping. If what the party leader says is the Bible, the scholars who decipher it study here. The National Communist Party School flies the party flag and teaches the party's version of China, united across 55 minority groups and the torchbearer of the communist flame. Professor Han Chun-Xiang says Xi inherits that legacy and is now China's indispensable leader.
The country's development needs Xi Jinping, and people's happiness needs Xi Jinping. If China wants to become a big, strong country, it will need Xi Jinping.
Xi says his work starts at home. His goal is to double China's GDP and per capita income. He says he wants to increase the prosperity many Chinese already enjoy and now expect, and reduce poverty.
Now in the Xi Jinping era, China has developed. Xi is dealing with making China great and strong.
And that strength is also the military. Xi calls for China to, quote, stand tall in the East. He evokes memories of the Middle Kingdom, a term to describe China's centuries-long role as an international power. Xi has dramatically modernized China's army, navy, and air force, and opened up China's first overseas base. And most controversially, China claims almost all of the South China Sea and has created military outposts, flouting U.S. objections and international law. Xi Jinping's China flexes that muscular foreign policy on the world stage and the silver screen. Wolf Warrior 2 is China's highest-grossing film of all time. Star and director Wu Jing plays Long Feng, a Special Operations Forces soldier who wins the day for the Chinese military.
Chinese wine!
When he's no longer a soldier, trouble comes to him. He becomes a rogue hero, launching a seeming suicide mission against the bad guys and teaming up with fellow Chinese to save the day again. If a story about a former soldier turned vigilante who uses bows and arrows and takes a ride in a tank sounds familiar, it is. At the height of the Cold War, the U.S. had John Rambo. Wu Jing asks, why can't the Chinese have their own heroes?
I think for Long Feng, I want him to be a hero for ordinary people. I think human beings need heroes. There are many qualities in a hero, like bravery, selflessness, and dedication.
Pass me the flag.
It's more than dedication to China. The good guys are the Chinese military. The bad guy,
welcome to Africa, son,
is a violence-loving colonialist American.
People like you will always be inferior to people like me.
history.
The film has made Wu Jing rich and famous. He says the film's nationalism is a product of the country's progress under Xi Jinping.
In Chinese modern history, China has been bullied for a long time. When we are rich, our country can protect us. When we feel like we are in danger, we will be protected by our country, not like before.
But Xi Jinping isn't only about protecting the people. He protects and restores the prominence of the Communist Party. Xi has reasserted the party into people's lives and private businesses.
Can you describe these awards?
Hong Cheng works for the medical and high-tech company Tidal Star, but her main job is to lead the company's Communist Party committee. She shows off her party awards.
This is for one of the service brands we acquired, being in the top 10 of all service brands.
Employees meet in Tidal Star's party room, where Xi Jinping thought is written on the wall, and Hong ensures this private company adheres to party teaching.
Today we're going to study an article. Please open the app, Study Xi, Strengthen China.
Under Xi, the party's primacy has increased and targeted the youngest party members. Employees are encouraged by the company to use the Study Xi, Strengthen China app to read about Xi and party leaders and take quizzes. And Hong ensures the company's vision aligns with the party's.
It not only leads our company in long-term development, the app offers our company inspiration.
For a while, that inspiration came from Xi himself. Last year, there was a primetime TV show studying Xi in the new era. A robot from a future rejuvenated China challenges contestants on how much Xi Jinping thought they can memorize. The cult of Xi has included propaganda posters in city streets, suburban villages, and rural roads. And state media has called him Xi Dada, or Father Xi, a populist who eats like the people and cares about the common worker. Xi calls himself core leader, just like Mao, and Xi's travels recreate Mao's countryside visits. This year, the cult of Xi has become less visible, but in Beijing's largest bookstore, Xi Jinping thought the book has pride of place. Despite the American celebrities nearby, bookstore manager Qin Hui says Xi's books are bestsellers.
Because we're entering this new era of development, the General Secretary Xi's thought points a direction for our future. So we have to seriously study the spirit of General Secretary Xi's speeches.
But fly 1,200 miles south of Beijing, and hundreds of thousands of people reject Xi Jinping thought and everything it stands for.
Xi Jinping's critics say he's not only spreading his own ideas, he's closing the space for anyone else's ideas, both in mainland China and here in Hong Kong, where these protesters say they feel like the city's independence is being eroded.
On and off for months, Hong Kong police have clashed with protesters, and many of the protesters connect the crackdown in Hong Kong to the restriction of rights in mainland China.
How can we expect that we will have democracy when the Communist Party is trying to ban all human rights and freedom in China?
Lee Chuk Yan is a former Hong Kong legislator who's been fighting for democracy for decades. He's protested half a dozen Chinese leaders, but says Xi Jinping is the most oppressive.
Xi Jinping began to even more aggressive in suppression. They banned the university professor from teaching about human rights, universal values, and he is trying to, build up his own Chinese dream, which is a total control of people.
Under Xi, more than 1 million Muslim Uyghurs have been detained in camps. Xi's China has created a network of more than 200 million surveillance cameras. And Beijing posters have warned the public, especially women, that foreigners could be spies trying to steal national secrets.
What the party says is that this is for the strength of China, that if the party were to weaken, the country would weaken, and there would be chaos.
Yeah, they are always brainwashing the people that, without a Communist Party, there would be chaos. So what they are trying to say, if you have democracy, then there will be chaos. We believe in democracy, but they believe in suppression.
Inside mainland China, few critics are willing to echo that language in public. Zhang Lifan is a historian who's made public appearances, but he says surveillance has increased. So we met him in the only place he felt comfortable, inside our hotel room. He wouldn't use Xi Jinping's name.
Because the Communist Party of China is unchecked, corruption is widespread within the system. So, if he wants to get rid of opponents, he can easily do so by finding evidence of their corruption. Therefore, he was able to purge many political opponents with an unstoppable force.
Lifan says Xi's eyes are everywhere. Lawyers who have represented activists have been disbarred. Journalists who write critically have been thrown out of the country. And as many as 2 million party members have been investigated for corruption. Xi has replaced collective leadership with centralized authority.
The current leader has changed everything. He first canceled the term limit of the country's presidency, and then re-raised the idea that the party leads everything. As a result, some of the achievements of the political reforms of the 1980s no longer exist.
Xi's reversing those reforms, launched by predecessor Deng Xiaoping, is a topic even Xi's allies avoid.
Deng talked about there shouldn't be excessive concentration or leadership by one person. Xi has removed term limits. Why has he done that?
This is not a problem yet, not the right time to talk about it.
Why are the needs of the country so great that Xi Jinping needs more time?
It's not the time to answer this question.
And then he says to our off-camera government minder,
this is a very sensitive issue.
Xi and China face headwinds, both home and abroad. But for the first time in modern history, the U.S. is confronted with an increasingly assertive rising superpower that's integrated with the U.S. economy. And as the U.S. puts America first, China is led by a man who believes the future of the world has China at the center.
And a major part of China's future, President Xi's Belton Road Initiative, the most expensive infrastructure project in history. Chinese companies are building roads, pipelines, and railroads around the world, but they're also building Chinese influence.
In the middle of West Java, Indonesia, fishermen drop nets from bamboo poles, and a tea plantation fills rolling hills that lead to a major highway in Indonesia's fourth largest city. Here on the outskirts of Bandung, the commuter train is old and slow. But now, cutting through the hills that lead to Indonesia's capital, Jakarta, there's a tunnel for a high-speed train, and the engineers and managers who lead this $6 billion project are Chinese. They construct railway that will carry the fastest train in southern Asia, able to travel 215 miles an hour. Xiao Songxin leads the consortium of Indonesian and Chinese companies building the railroad.
The two countries' companies can complement each other, support each other, and develop together. It's fundamentally a win-win project.
2,000 years ago, the ancient Silk Road helped China spread goods, ideas, and culture all the way to Europe. Today, China aspires to recreate a maritime Silk Road of ports and an economic belt across 70 countries of roads in the orange and railways in the red, including the high-speed route from Bandung to Jakarta, where in 2013, President Xi Jinping debuted Belt and Road Initiative as a signature foreign policy.
Only with high ambition and hard work can one make great achievements. We have the confidence, conditions, and capabilities to obtain our goals.
For Indonesia, the goal is to collaborate with China on Belt and Road projects to lift millions of its citizens out of poverty. At this construction yard, many lower-skilled Indonesians in the yellow hats have been trained by Chinese workers in the white hats. Belt and Road projects create jobs and spark development, says Indonesian Minister Luhut Panjaitan.
Just benefit us very much, because we're going to have also like a new cities, suburb, so then we can spread out people to the area. Yeah.
With new industry, new employment, new production.
Yes, indeed.
Indonesia needs improved infrastructure. Right now, the road from Jakarta to Bandung weaves through the edges of forest, where constant traffic means the 90-mile trip takes 5 hours. On the railroad being built over the next 3 years, the trip will take 45 minutes. Luhut dreams of Indonesians traveling like the Chinese.
I experienced now when I was in Beijing, I went from Beijing to what name of the city? Only 1 hour by speed train, you know. Very comfortable.
Like the train we rode from Hong Kong to the city of Shenzhen on the Chinese mainland.
We will soon arrive at Shenzhen Bay.
Welcome to China.
In 20 years, China has gone from no high-speed rail to the longest high-speed rail network in the world, thanks to state-owned enterprises. The rails, the electricity, the telecommunications, all produced by majority state-owned enterprises, and much of the steel comes from companies like the majority state-owned Bao Steel. The company is now so large it has its own ports, 4 of them on the outskirts of Shanghai. Bao Steel Group makes as much steel as the entire U.S. It's actually too much. Excess Chinese steel capacity weighs down the economy. The Belt and Road Initiative gives Bao Steel new markets. Huan Wei Liang directs Bao Steel's strategic planning and technology.
For the steel industry, the Belt and Road Initiative will generate direct demand for steel products. With the economic development in those Belt and Road countries, their people's living standards will improve, and thus the demands for durable consumer goods will increase.
And China says Belt and Road railroads also improve Chinese living standards by connecting rural, previously unconnected areas such as this site in Sichuan province. The government argues more rail access produces prosperity and stability.
We encourage Chinese companies to go out of China to enhance their production capability. In return, we can use the increased government revenue to improve the income level of some poor areas. This is important.
Xiao Weiming leads the office in the Chinese ministry that oversees the Belt and Road Initiative. He describes the initiative as helping China to develop internally and expand externally.
China has entered a new era. The Belt and Road Initiative is the banner of China's new round of reform and opening up, as well as a general plan of economic cooperation with foreign countries.
But for some countries, that cooperation led to a loss of control. In Kunantan, Malaysia, a state-owned Chinese developer was building this industrial park and port, but the construction is frozen, stopped by an unlikely critic.
China is a big power now, and big powers normally want to expand their influence.
Mahathir Mohamad served as Malaysian Prime Minister from 1981 to 2003. He used to describe the U.S. as the colonizer. But last year, at the age of 92, he came out of retirement and was re-elected. His opponent was accused of siphoning off Chinese money connected to Belt and Road contracts. Mahathir called China the new colonizer and Belt and Road projects predatory.
Everything is imported, mostly from China. Workers were from China. All the parts and the material were from China. And the payment for the contract were also to be made in China. That means that Malaysia doesn't get any benefit at all.
The original contracts called for Chinese-built ports, Chinese-built pipelines, a $20 billion Chinese-built rail link, and the Malacca Gateway, a Chinese-financed development project on the Malacca Strait, through which almost all Chinese oil flows. Mahathir accused the Chinese of taking advantage of a corrupt government.
The whole thing was done in a hurry by the previous government without due regard for the interests of Malaysia.
In Belt and Road deals, countries can lose sovereignty and China can gain assets. Sri Lanka had to hand over a port when it couldn't afford debt payments to a Chinese bank. To build this Belt and Road railroad with Chinese loans, Kenya agreed to apply Chinese law inside Kenya and give up East Africa's largest port if it couldn't repay its debts. And to pay for South America's largest dam, Ecuador is selling 80% of its most valuable asset, oil, to China at a discount. Mahathir says he too feared that loss of control.
When you start borrowing huge sums of money and asking foreign countries to develop, and then you cannot pay, then obviously you are going to lose that part of the country.
That warning has been echoed by the United States' most senior officials.
We don't drown our partners in sea of debt. We don't coerce or compromise your independence. The United States deals openly, fairly. We do not offer a constricting belt or a one-way road.
The U.S. argues China's version of Belt and Road fosters corruption. The state-owned China Communications Construction Company alone has been accused of bribery across 4 countries. The U.S. also warns China's ports could one day host Chinese warships. Last year, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo warned that could lead to a Chinese empire.
When China shows up with bribes to senior leaders in countries in exchange for infrastructure projects, then this idea of a treasury-run empire build is something that I think would be bad for each of those countries and certainly presents risk to American interests.
The United States government describes the Belton Road Initiative as a way for Chinese to exert control and to increase Chinese power around the world.
We Chinese do not have what you call ambition or a grand vision to change the world order. We only want to promote more economic cooperation.
What's your response to that criticism? That the Belt and Road Initiative contracts are debt traps and aren't transparent?
Chinese companies won the bidding, and other foreign companies did not win. And the reason is simple. Foreign companies and workers are not as hardworking as the Chinese.
But don't those Chinese companies get advantages, not because they're just hard workers, but because they're protected by the Chinese state?
I cannot say it's the Chinese government's support. China's financial institutions will provide financing only if they deem the projects are profitable. We do not make investments blindly. We Chinese are not stupid.
And some of the countries with Belt and Road investments say they're not stupid either. Malaysia renegotiated with China, and in late July, the construction of the rail link restarted in a joint Malaysian-Chinese ceremony. China agreed to reduce the price tag for construction by 30% and allow more Malaysian workers.
They are willing to listen to our views, and in the end, they accommodated our problems.
U.S. officials say they're trying to develop an alternative. The leaders of a new $60 billion agency that launched in October have been visiting countries where China is investing. The U.S. is pitching public-private deals to counter Belt and Road investments. And the U.S. advocates Japanese investment as an alternative. Japan built Jakarta's local subway, but the Chinese deals are better. Indonesian Minister Luhut told the Japanese.
And I said to them, okay, look, your term on the, on the previous project, I think too tight for us. The Chinese offer us now the term much better.
And countries who receive Belt and Road investment say the Trump administration is difficult to deal with compared to the Chinese.
They've got this Belt and Road Initiative. Does the United States offer anything like that?
Never, To reach Washington is very hard, We don't know to whom that they have to talk. In China, we have so many people over there,
The U.S. approach is always with a big stick and very little carrot. This has not happened with the Chinese. That's not the Chinese way.
But the Chinese way is to increase its presence and find allies all over the world to increase influence. The Belt and Road Initiative is the engine to power that expansion, and it's full speed ahead.
The U.S.-China trade war has largely played out as a tariff war, but there are fundamental issues and arguments on both sides. So Katrina Yu and I report together, beginning in China's Silicon Valley, Shenzhen.
In Shenzhen's Segi Market, you can buy anything electronic. There are 10 floors of circuit boards, battery-powered children's toys, digital watches, wireless headphones, even Bitcoin mining computers.
And all of this is sold all over the world because international companies have long tapped into China's massive market and huge supply of reliable labor.
If you have an electronic product that's labeled made in China, the chances are its parts come from here and end up all over the world, including the U.S.
For decades, the world's two largest economies, the U.S. and China, have been integrated. But now the Trump administration is trying to change that. And the trade war is not only going to affect American businesses and consumers,
but also businesses and consumers here in China.
Segi Market has been called the barometer of China's electronics industry. Components and finished products are sourced from super factories all over Shenzhen. More than 60,000 businesses have set up shop here. While they may sell everywhere, this year all eyes are on the U.S.
I hope the trade war doesn't continue to get worse. Let's keep a peaceful relationship. Don't raise tariffs because no one wins.
All the vendors we spoke to blame President Trump for the trade war. And some say Trump feels threatened by China's success.
China's electronics industry is pretty good. Now Trump is just trying to suppress China's development.
Though some freely admit to selling copies of US products. I ask her if this is a GoPro.
No, it's not a GoPro. GoPro is made abroad and it's very expensive. But this one is cheap and it's similar.
How similar, Nick?
Well, very similar. The Chinese sports cam looks exactly like the American GoPro. At this Chinese New Barlin store, take a look at the words. The sneakers and the writing look an awful lot like American New Balance. That's just two examples of Chinese copycatting that the U.S. has turned into theft on an industrialized scale. The U.S. has indicted hackers connected to the Chinese military for stealing specs of an American power plant similar to this model and navigation satellite technology. And the U.S. says the most expensive weapons system ever, the American F-35, looks just like the Chinese J-31 because Chinese hackers stole the designs. The U.S. says in just a few decades, theft helped China make its military world-class and its companies technology leaders.
That kind of technological advancement doesn't happen organically.
Jake Parker has lived in Beijing for a decade and is the vice president of the U.S.-China Business Council, which advocates for American businesses in China.
China's system is set up in such a way that the state has access to information that companies would consider to be trade secrets. The amount of information that's transferred to the Chinese government goes far beyond what would be expected in another market.
As businessman,
you handle it, man,
and presidential candidate, Donald Trump has accused China of pursuing decades of predatory trade practices.
We can't continue to allow China to rape our country, and that's what they're doing. It's the greatest theft in the history of the world.
When you see China, these are fierce people in terms of negotiation. They want to take your throat out. They want to cut you apart.
The Trump administration has increased U.S. demands that China stop intellectual property theft and what the U.S. calls other unfair trade practices. The administration has released two major investigations into Chinese corporate theft and labeled Chinese computer, telecom, and technology companies risks to American national security.
President Trump has raised issues that have been an irritant in the relationship for a very, very long time.
You know, we're the piggy bank that everybody steals from, including China.
That have not been adequately addressed by the Chinese side. And frankly, those issues go to the core of how China's economic system operates. It's state-owned enterprise reform, it's industrial policy, it's subsidies, it's overcapacity. These are not going to be easy solutions that China is going to be able to implement immediately.
That's because those protectionist measures and state-sponsored business development have fueled China's rapid economic rise. Nowhere is that more obvious than China's artificial intelligence, or AI, industry. In China's northeastern Liaoning province, X-Robot is working on human-like AI robots. China wants to be the global center for AI by 2030, and some in the Trump administration believe China is fast closing the gap on the US's dominance of AI. They can mimic facial expressions, respond to questions, and even host a TV show. X-Robot president Yang Dongyue says his company will be one of the first in the world whose robots can replace service employees.
Their main function is to communicate with people, so a good appearance is a must. If the robot is very good looking, like a pretty lady or a handsome man, people will feel more pleasant when talking with them.
Beijing has been so determined to catch up and surpass the US in AI technology, it's committed $150 billion to its development. X-Robot acknowledges that it receives government subsidies, but refuses to disclose how much. Meanwhile, China accuses the US of investing billions on its own AI technology, like this robotic pack mule that's being funded by Pentagon Research.
But Katrina, the U.S. denies that Pentagon spending is a subsidy and complains China's subsidies are into private companies and concealed in every industry, tilting the global playing field in China's favor and violating international trade rules.
The Chinese Communist Party has used an arsenal of policies inconsistent with free and fair trade. These policies have built Beijing's manufacturing base at the expense of its competitors. especially the United States of America.
China has built its own manufacturing base that provides cheap and efficient labor, and many US businesses use it to maximize profits. Shanghai General Sports is one of the biggest bicycle manufacturers in China. The company produces more than 3 million bikes every year. CEO Lei Ge attributes the company's success to building close relationships with his partners abroad, particularly in the US.
We work with our partner in the States as a family. That's why we can become so close.
That supply chain integration has built up over 30 years, and it means the trade war has hit Shanghai General Sports and many companies in China that sell to the US. Lei has had to let go about 30% of his staff. It doesn't help that China's economic growth has slumped to its lowest level in nearly 3 decades.
Oh, well, we hate this. It's just more difficult than ever. Of course, we feel disappointed and we feel upset, but there's nothing we can do.
This factory produces up to 13,000 bicycles every day. They're sent to countries such as Australia, Canada, and Japan, but 80% of them are made for the United States.
And arrive in this South Carolina factory.
We're producing this year about 300,000 bicycles.
Arnold Kamler is one of the primary buyers of Shanghai General Sports' parts. He's the chairman and CEO of Kent Bikes, one of the largest bike wholesalers in the U.S. On every bike frame imported from China, Kent has to pay a 36% tariff to U.S. customs. On every tire, it's 30%.
When you pay that amount to U.S. customs, do you therefore increase your prices to your clients?
Of course. The bicycle business is a very high volume, but unfortunately for me, a very low profit margin business. And so when we have an increase of that size, we have no choice but to raise prices.
And those higher prices have led to a 20% drop in sales since the trade war began. And that's meant Kamler's had to lay off a quarter of his employees.
These tariffs are hurting us very badly, but we're a smart company, and so we'll overcome this challenge by sourcing elsewhere over time.
And that's exactly what's happening. General Sports will turn this field in Cambodia into a 500,000 square foot factory. Lei says it's an investment he wishes he didn't have to make because he fears labor costs will rise.
I prefer stay in China, speak same language, and it's easier to find workers.
It may not be good for businesses, but driving companies out of China is music to many in the Trump administration's ears. Some senior advisors want to continue economic integration with China, but others see China as a national security threat and want to separate the two economies.
President Trump has vacillated between the camps. In late August, he tweeted, "Our great American companies are hereby ordered to immediately start looking for an alternative to China." But at the G7 in France, just 3 days later, he said American companies could still thrive in China.
If we make a deal, I'd like to see him stay there and do a great job.
On Chinese media, commentators argue President Trump's flip-flops show he's unreliable.
You cannot be in a situation where I don't believe what you're saying, and I don't believe you'll carry out even if you do. How can I have a negotiation with you?
China has taken steps to ensure it's less vulnerable to Trump's trade war shots, from boosting domestic supplies of soybeans, corn, and cotton, to expanding export markets beyond the US to Africa and South America. With no need for democratic elections and what it calls a higher economic pain threshold, Chinese TV says China can outlast Trump.
Anyone who misjudges China will surely pay the price of the Chinese people's steel will.
But President Trump has said he can outlast China and vows to hold his ground, even if that harms the U.S. economy short term.
I am doing this whether it's good or bad for your statement about, oh, will we fall into a recession for 2 months, okay? The fact is somebody had to take China on. My life would be a lot easier if I didn't take China on, but I like doing it because I have to do it.
Which means U.S.-China cooperation is decreasing and the confrontation is increasing.
And the trade war continues as two economies that have been integrated for decades are already drifting apart.
Now, in this clip that you have just watched, you will see China's massive Belt and Road Initiative, also known as One Belt, One Road, chronicled on Sunday in a lengthy article in New York Times, said it fits into this soft power offensive in some respects. Beijing plans to spend as much as $1 trillion US. $1 trillion US. Where did that money come from? From the sale of produce to different parts of the world, out of the things that they manufactured, from my resources, from our resources, from the technology that they stole, which they now turned into greater efficiency. The huge surplus of money they have now becomes a very powerful tool to achieve this economic baiting program. Beijing plans to spend and raise as much as $1 trillion US in an effort to create a vast new road and rail infrastructure, energy projects, and other needed infrastructure across many parts of Eurasia, even in Africa and parts of Western Europe. Van Veng said along the jungle-covered mountains of Laos, squads of Chinese engineers are drilling hundreds of tunnels and bridges to support a 260-mile railway, a $6 billion project that will eventually link and connect 8 Asian countries. I said to you earlier on, I have seen the Chinese in Sierra Leone. I have seen the Chinese in Equatorial Guinea. I've seen the Chinese in Guinea building roads and building railways. The only thing that you find, the conditionalities under which these things are built, only heaven knows. It's what is disclosed that you know. But from what we have seen as it happened to them in Eastern Africa, where for reasons of not being able to pay back what was used in building this particular port, whether it's Mombasa or whether it's in Djibouti, they have taken it over as their own asset. There is no free lunch. There is an intent behind what is being done. A global power reach, a global power play. Now, Chinese money is building power plants in Pakistan to address chronic electricity shortages, part of the expected $46 billion worth of investment. I do not remember precisely the name of, whether I think it is the Shiroro Dam, which should have been one of the largest hydroelectric plants that is being built in Nigeria. It is also Chinese money that is supposed to be behind it. They pick on your weakest points. They come with you with whatever it is, default on the loan payment, you become their captive. We should be wise in this country. Our rulers better understand that the responsibility is on their part to look at these things very, very squarely. As you will see in some of the clips that you saw how, I believe it was Malaysia stood up to China and said, sorry, this is where it stops. You will not do this because it's not in our own best interest. Of course, because they knew it was beneficial for them also as Chinese, they had to change the terms to what was acceptable to the Malaysians. So, we need to wake up from our slumber. I said, Chinese money is building power plants in Pakistan to address chronic shortages, electricity shortages, and part of an expected $46 billion worth of investment. Chinese planners are mapping out train lines from Budapest to Belgrade, from Serbia, providing another artery for Chinese goods flowing into Europe through a Chinese-owned port in Greece. So you will find, as it is happening in America with a different facet, it is happening in Europe with a different facet, it is happening in Africa with a different facet. To promote their goods, to promote the global reach, all under the economic baiting program. The massive infrastructure projects, along with hundreds of others across Asia, Africa, and Europe, form the backbone of Chinese ambitious economic and geopolitical agenda. It has now come worldwide. People have been suckered into it. It's now unfolding fully what the intent is. But President Xi Jinping of China is literally and figuratively forging ties, creating new markets for the country's construction companies, and exporting its model of state-led development in a quest to create deep economic connections and strong diplomatic relationships. What a way to achieve the use of soft power and trap the unwary until the military eventually follows. I recall years ago when I was in Sydney, Australia, and we were looking at what they were doing in terms of coal mining and so on and so forth. Big Chinese money was there. Digging and so on and so forth. Now that the Australians are beginning to say, wait a minute, guys, you will see later on what they did. And the Australians were trying to now win themselves away to try and form an alliance with Japan. And China came out in their true colors. Very strong warnings of punitive things that they would do if that kind of combination, if it arose. That was not Chinese intonation in 2007. It wasn't so in 2014. But in 2020, the tiger has now come out, showing itself in its true colors. Now, part of building the global influence is being able to support its military forces far away from home. Boom! The real thing is now showing. China already has an overt military base in Djibouti, as well as numerous civilian infrastructure in the Indian Ocean region that might have dual utility to support a future People's Liberation Army's footprint. The Pentagon assesses that China has likely considered additional military logistics facilities in Myanmar, in Thailand, in Singapore, in Indonesia, in Pakistan, in Sri Lanka, in the United Arab Emirates, in Kenya, in Seychelles, in Tanzania, in Angola, and in Tajikistan. Who knows when it is going to reach Nigeria? These things started like creeping sleep. It's now taking and grabbing people and making them see what it is that is at stake in the times in which we are. Despite growing international concern over China's intentions and behavior, the jury is now out whether many of these countries will be able to resist hosting dual-use facilities, especially neighbors like Singapore, Indonesia, and Myanmar. Indonesia, large population like Nigeria. You will hear the comments of the Indonesian Prime Minister when they had taken him to China, wined and dined him, he began to sing their tune. How many, they have created a China-African forum where all the leaders of Africa are invited to come. Why don't you come to Africa? Why must they go to, why must a conference of that nature be held in China? What power are you holding over African countries other than that you are playing on their weakness for infrastructure, for corruption, and for the fact that there is real and there is genuine need? I am simply saying to our African leaders, you are in a position to negotiate what you want and what you don't want. Don't sell the future of your children. You will be long dead when the Chinese, with their large numbers, and they are exporting not only their goods, they are exporting their peoples too. They are exporting their people too. Go and see in Nigeria. Other than that, during this lockdown, Nigerians taught them good lessons. When the Chinese began to misbehave, to try and beat up Nigerians and throw them around in their factories, of course, as a fierce and independent people, they got the thorough beating of their lives. They better watch out. Nigeria is not like other places. You may succeed in whatever you are doing in bribing and so on and so forth. But come to the grassroots, you will find wild ones who will teach you lessons too. But we speak to our leaders, save us that embarrassment. Save us that embarrassment. Your intentions may be good in building infrastructure. Let us know the cost of what we are building. And I'm not talking of cost in terms of numbers. What are we giving up in terms of our sovereignty and the future of our children? That's what we are talking about. In the face of this dragon that is moving and moving rapidly. The One Belt, One Road is by far the largest such economic spending plan in the world today. It is even larger than the Marshall Plan that the Americans brought up in the times when they were reconstructing Europe. It is when the Americans saw what China had now unleashed on Africa that they also now woke up under Mr. Trump to say, we must now step up our own infrastructure investments in many of these African countries as a way of countering what China was doing. I say this not because I am in support of America, because they also did it for political reasons. But in fact, what they are doing, they didn't understand the spiritual implications of it, that they were trying to stop the face of the serpent from taking over the world. We are saying to ourselves, the infrastructure creation, aid, and jobs that will come with the initiative could boost growth in places from Laos to Pakistan, from many places to many parts of Eastern Europe, and could theoretically improve China's public image in Southeast Asia, in Africa, in Latin America, and other developing regions of the world. But it comes at a price, at a major and a significant price that most do not know until it is fully unfolded in their own climb. With the United States global image weakening and democracy is in dire shape in many parts of the world, Beijing undoubtedly is getting stronger strategically and economically, is stepping into the Middle East sphere, which is really where we are going. And where our next broadcast is going to focus essentially, because you need to see how this economic baiting has given an inroad to the partners that are listed in that Ezekiel chapter 38, principal amongst them being Iran. This year, in the month of October, a $400 billion deal to support the failing economy of Iran. Iran kept it as a secret first. They denied it, but eventually it came out. When once Iran, the arch enemy of Israel, falls into the camp of China with its Belt and Road Initiative, which will show you very clearly where the fulfillment of that scripture we read to you from the book of Revelation chapter 16. He said, Euphrates was dried up to make a way for the kings of the east. You will see the path of that one belt road as it passes through, parallel to the Euphrates. Then you understand that the days of the end, they are upon us. These things are happening. People call it politics. People call it economics. But I seek to see from the eyes of God that we may bring understanding to the wary so that they know that the times are upon us. Beijing is undoubtedly waxing stronger strategically and economically, is stepping into the Middle Eastern sphere that it dared not do in the past. From December 2019 to as recent as October 2020, there are major developments that are taking place in that area that is involving the Chinese, both militarily, as you will see in some of the things, in precisely December 27, 28, 29, they held a first joint military campaign between Iran, between China, and Russia in that area. first time ever that China will come with its own military force in that place. Open your eyes, open your ears, because that combination is already forming. The falling of Iran into the laps of China, the alliance between Turkey and Iran is creating completely that pathway for the coming of the kings of the East. God bless you. We shall see you next time on the stage.
Praise God. Hallelujah. What an awesome time we have had here today. The coming of the Lord is at hand. Everything is adding up. And it's all stated plainly in the Word of God. Let's not be among the foolish that will explain them away as mere chance happenings. The Word of God is fulfilling scripture by scripture. Let us prepare for the coming of the Lord. Till we come your way again, stay blessed and stay connected to Jesus.